joining us today. We're students from South Florida College of Nursing, teaming up with Miami Media School. And my name is Giselle.
My name is Erica.
My name is Jen.
And what we're going to talk about today is people suffering from post-COVID depression. And basically we teamed up to come up with ways that we could help. So many people have dealt with losses, anxiety, loneliness from the COVID-19 pandemic, that we came up, in our school, we came up with a way that we could help. So we came up with a website that's found at postcovid19depression.wordpress.com. And basically there we have the resources that we could find to help you for anyone suffering from post-COVID-19 depression. If you think you are suffering from depression, you could take our survey that we provided that's based on the patient health questionnaire. And there it'll give you a scale from mild to severe on the type of depression you may be suffering due to post-COVID-19. We actually had a lot of people already do the survey for us. We already have 35 responses. And we noticed that 50% of our community in Miami-Dade and Broward are currently suffering from post-COVID-19 depression. And I think it's becoming more and more as our pandemic grows, and it's something that we should seriously look into, because at all ages people are suffering from this depression. We've had, later on we'll show you some interviews we did with even children that are suffering from depression. And in our survey, our goal basically is to show our short-term goal to show if you are suffering from depression and at what severity, how we could help. And we could evaluate the needs that you may have, whether it's providing you with therapy that we recommend, group therapy, individual therapy. We have Zoom meetings now available. We have our first one December 3rd with a special guest that's a psychologist that will be giving pointers on how to deal with depression. We also include resources on our website that could be found for if you're scared to leave your house, on how to get groceries delivered to your house, or go to, if you're maybe a senior, what stores are open earlier for you to access food without a big crowd, and just make the environment safer for you during this pandemic to help with your anxiety or depression. Based on our surveys, we did different age groups from 18 to 35, 36 to 65, and older, anyone 65 years and older. And we have we created graphs to show that you are not alone, and that's our biggest message today, is you are not alone in this depression. Several individuals are suffering from post-COVID-19 depression, and we're here to listen. Feel free to write us emails, join our Zoom. We're here to listen. You could talk about your feelings, and we hope to help you in any way we can. We found that a majority of our individuals 18 through 65 are the most impacted by this depression. And a lot in Miami-Dade, secondly in Broward, at least in South Florida, from what we saw. And 50% said they are suffering from a moderate to severe type of depression, based on our surveys. And a lot were from a loss of a family or friends, general anxiety, or two or more. Maybe you did have a lot of anxiety. I personally know, and I'll share my story later, of the anxiety you face when you do have a family member in the hospital and a loved one, and the anxiety that you go through during that process. And the depression is very alarming, as because of the pandemic, we are facing a lot of people with severe anxiety and depression, and we also have suicide hotlines available that people could get help from to avoid a further severe depression. We have special guests with us that will be tuning in. The first one is actually the daughter of Erica, and she went from a normal environment of going to school, and she all of a sudden had to do virtual schooling, and she shows in her conversation with her mother the struggles that she had to go through, which I'm sure a lot of children are facing today, and the obstacles of not leaving the house and how she feels. So if we could tune in now, we'll listen to Gianna with the anxiety she's facing as a child going through virtual school.
How old are you, Gianna?
9.
we're going to talk about COVID-19 and depression.
Okay.
Are you doing virtual education?
Yes, I am.
What's the most difficult thing you are facing because you're learning virtually?
Well, the people in my class, they get more attention than the people virtually. There's some kids in my class that are doing it virtually that they don't pay attention. So our teacher always, well, if one person does something wrong, the rest of the virtual kids also get faults. And they always praise the people in class because they're always working when she doesn't see the things that we do at home because she can't physically see it. She only sees her face. And if we try to answer on our own, she gets mad because we're supposed to raise our hands, but there's not much we can do when she only focuses on the people that are in class.
Are you scared of COVID?
Well, yes.
What makes you scared about COVID?
Well, because sometimes my grandma puts on the news and sometimes I'll glance at it and I see how many people have died. And I get really scared if that could be one of my family members that happens to that.
Because of this, do you want to leave your house or not?
I would like to stay home because I don't want to risk my life or the people that are with me. The way I feel like this is because I think as long as they stay home and we protect ourselves, I think that nothing bad can happen to us.
Is there anything else you would like to share with us?
You get very bored, you get very sad, you get very lonely. But I think every action comes with a price, and I think if you stay home, there's a good price, which is you're saving your family members' lives and your life too.
Thank you, Gianna, for your time.
Okay.
Stay
bye.
tuned, okay?
I will.
Well, Erica, can you talk to me about what it was like speaking to your daughter and seeing that she is suffering from a type of depression as a child because of post-COVID-19?
It was alarming. I'm not going to sit here and say that it wasn't. It was alarming just because you don't sit here and you don't talk to your kids about depression and this and that. And the way that she took it, I really didn't understand until we had that interview with her, how she feels like she's being really left out. At such a young age of 9 years old, like her whole life just turned around completely. She doesn't go to school, she doesn't see her friends, and even though we do the Zooming and we do the FaceTiming, it's never the same of having like a physical touch or just sitting there, like she says, like during lunchtime, how they would gossip. So I did see that, she's not understanding that it's depression, but it is depression because she doesn't see nobody. She feels lonely. Like she said it in her conversation, she feels lonely.
Yeah. I noticed that I didn't think about, so she mentioned is, I know the teachers are voicing a lot their opinion on the struggle they're going through, teaching virtually, plus the kids in the classroom now. They have a dual teaching. And she was saying how it's difficult for her as a virtual student, that when she raises her hand, the teacher might not see her because she has to go through, I guess, the screen on the computer and then see the kids in the classroom.
It's kind of like, in a way, it's kind of disappointing because there's not so many students in the class to begin with. But just the fact that she needs to call out, or how it bothers her, the fact that she cannot participate as more as the kids are there. Like, she feels like they don't care about her because she's online, so they don't get to see her. Mm-hmm. We actually had that conversation again this morning, how she feels like, it's not fair and this and that, which it isn't fair. And I know it's difficult for them, it's difficult for the teachers, it's difficult for her, it's difficult for the kids in class. How do you deal with it? Like, how can you reach out to the teacher? I'm not going to go ahead and tell her, like, my child feels left out, but right. That becomes, again, that's leaning more towards a depression because she's feeling left out.
Right. Do you feel that she's learning better or the same virtually or in person? or is she having a hard time focusing more?
She's not learning. I do get to hear when I am around. I know what she's learning now. Like, you know, there's no in betweens. Like, I don't have to ask the teacher. It's difficult and it's different because she has to stare into a computer for 8 hours straight. It's just a half hour because they only get half hour of lunch. That's off. Even PE is online.
Wow.
So is she learning? I mean, sometimes that's a difficult question. I am thankful that she pushes herself, and sometimes when she notices that the teacher does engage with her, of course she gives a little bit more, but it's never the same as the interaction as person to person.
Right. I was speaking to a few psychologists, and they were mentioning how they're seeing a lot of parents bringing in their children to diagnose them with ADD because of the virtual learning, which is something interesting because, you know, you wouldn't have that up until, I wonder if, unfortunately, if that is going to cause some problems with their learning.
I think it is because and I think as the teachers too, they kind of notice it online. Even though some of the kids are online, I feel like they're struggling. Some kids more than others are struggling a lot more. And I don't know how it's going to be diagnosed or how is it going to turn around, but there is a lot of kids that don't learn, virtually.
Right. Well, I hope it gets better for her, and tell her thank you so much for giving us her feedback on the virtual learning. And now we have another individual, Mary Jane, that discusses with us what it's like to stay home all day and deal with the anxiety. And she herself had a family member that was hospitalized and what she went through during that time. So let's listen into that.
I just had a couple questions regarding to the general anxiety due to COVID.
Yes.
How do you deal with it during the crisis that happens?
Well, actually, what I try to do, I'll walk, try to read sometimes, do a little exercise, and that kind of help a little, kind of help me a little bit just getting out the house.
So the next question we're gonna ask you is, so do you feel like you were unable to leave your house, and do you feel like you really get anxiety or depressed over that?
Yes, you do get anxiety and depressed sometimes. Because for me personally, I'm new here in Florida. I'm not living here. I just come here for school. So my family is like back home in New York. So when the COVID came in, my ex-husband, he got sick with COVID. He was in the hospital. The kids were like terrified because they did not know what to do. And then my daughter ended up also in the hospital. So I tried to go to New York, not knowing that I was not able to fly. And then when I got to the airport, they turned me back. They said no flight going to New York. So all I had was to do is like to communicate with them on the phone, and I wasn't able to see them or anything, and they was not able to go to the hospital to visit their father. So that was another thing and me again. So, it let you get depressed sometimes. So when I feel like that, instead of like staying in the house, thank God it's a community where you could actually walk around. You have, you have a lake, so I would walk around the lake. I would sit, just sit around there, and I would just kind of just breathe and basically just trying to manage, So that's how some of the things that I try to do to manage,
Okay.
So it don't really like drive me into like deep depression. So.
What do you think the biggest lifestyle change that you had to make, due to COVID?
Well, the biggest lifestyle change that I personally have to make is in my finance. I have to like more prioritize what I'll pay or what could stay. And when I came down here, I was working, in the home with this lady, and then I had to stop working because of the COVID. I'm back and forth with her, which was not safe for her because at the time I had to go into the hospital to do my clinicals, so it was not safe for her. So I have lost that job. So whatever savings I have to like kind of adjust to my. I have to adjust my finance and how I spend and on a tight budget, and that was not working out for me. So, but I guess you just have to do what you have to do to make ends meet, and basically that's what I had to do.
Okay, Mary Jane, thank you for the interview. So
You're
now
welcome.
we're gonna stop the recording and
Yes.
we'll talk to you later, okay?
Okay, thank you. All right.
Thank you. Bye.
So Chin, you interviewed her. What did it feel you work in the hospital as well. Maybe tell us a little bit about both. What's it like, the anxiety level that you're seeing because of post-COVID-19?
Well, basically, let's start with myself. I work in a Hialeah hospital. Basically, at that time, during the initial crisis in April or March, there was not much going on, and it's actually start hitting was in May, August, and during that period of time, the anxiety level was pretty high by April, by May, and then you really start seeing the population, far as the nursing home, and everybody come to ER to the floor, and we couldn't move them out, and we just pack floor to floors, and then you heard the story where there's not enough personal protection equipment, and you facing the fact that they were moving staff to different floors, and you start seeing a lot of changes, and which is just like we were prepared, but we were not trained to deal with this type of changes. And then I think that is one of the things make us kind of like you go into a zone where you are comfortable and then you become uncomfortable, and that uncomfortableness rise a lot of issues. And so basically, every time I come home and then I see like outside's fine, the world's fine, but the human population world wasn't fine. And so like I when I speak to Mary Jane, I notice like it's a similar feeling that both of us have. And during her interview and her and mine, basically was being stuck at home all day, and then also at the same time you watching news, and that hurts. You really getting overflow by the information day by day. But if you ever been through any type of medical course, medical history, or work around medical field, you do know the fact that everything takes time. Right. And day by day, month by month, solution will get developed, but it's part of like trial and error, which is, you don't want to say it, but it's true.
For someone, I think someone not in the medical field, the news must be extremely scary right now, because you don't know.
Yeah.
What does it mean to get a new vaccine, or what does it mean the trial of the drugs?
Right. So what trial the vaccine? I mean, especially like last 2 years, it was mandated all hospital employees need to get a flu shot, and there's still misconception about flu shot. People still get scared. So therefore we're gonna have another issue that arises. But the most important was the fact that like being stuck at home and listen to bad news all day, and not being able to continue your daily life. And you when you go outside, you can breathe airs, you can drink water. Groceries still clean. It's not like you get sick from food, but you get sick from human to human transmission. So you don't know.
It's like coming out to a whole new world. that
Yeah.
You're not used to.
Yeah.
Comfort zone.
So that certainly can relate. And then the thing is, I'm in a working world. So people who are working used to work every day. All of a sudden you're not working, and that was another financial stress that she was mentioned.
Right.
Part of the issue that she had to cut her budget, pay what most important, and delay some other thing that could eventually pay off. And then financially, you said it doesn't bring stress to you, but it does, because you don't know when the light get turned off. You don't know when they're gonna start doing the not paying rent on time, or they tow your car. Those things still happens. It's not like we stop. It's still going on. It's just that it's not visible until it happened to you. And then the other issue was Mary Jane. It was from New York, and she have a husband that got sick, and she later on she had a daughter got sick, and she can't go to New York to visit her daughter, her husband, because she's down here, have a job.
That's the saddest thing of that interview is she can't even get there because then they quarantine you for 2 weeks. I mean, I don't know what the flights are nowadays, but it's very strict to even travel right now.
It is. So, and you heard stories that people related to you that they can't go in a hospital, physically see a person. I think that affects a lot of people. Being in a hospital alone, and also to in a bed alone by yourself, and then the family doesn't see them, be with them and sit with them. I think that is another huge human connection that I think like we used to have, and now we missed it. And so I think that's probably essential for all of us to think about. It's not really the medicine, the doctor, the nurses. Maybe it's a family member that's more important to the patient, that we thought that it could be ignored. Now you find out it's important. Yeah.
So, Giselle, you also had a family member. You had 2 family members pass away.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit of that experience? And
so unfortunately my own father and my grandfather were hospitalized early Father's Day morning. They both had COVID, and my grandfather fought for a week, and within the week he passed away on June 27th. And my dad fought for 41 days in ICU and passed away August 1st.
so did you get to see your family members?
No, my grandfather, he had fallen, and we didn't know that a form of COVID-19 is also that it'll affect your brain. And so he fell 2 times. And I remember one of the times I was actually in one of our clinical rotations in Hialeah Hospital, and my mother called me to rush over and help him because he had fallen. And when we took him to the hospital, I forget, it was 1 a.m. on Father's Day, and I had gone to his house a few hours before that, and I checked him, and he was fine. And then all of a sudden, a few hours later, he was very delirious. He lived across the street from my parents' house. So he was very delirious. He forgot who he was. He was a retired OBGYN, so he thought he was delivering a baby at that time, and was asking us for water and to assist him to deliver a baby. And so my brothers drove him to Palmetto Hospital, which is where my father worked. My father was an internist, and that's how my dad got it. He got it from being in the front lines, and he got it from one of his patients, unfortunately. And he was fighting it great at home with my mom, but unfortunately it affected him and my grandfather harder. So I got to meet my grandfather at the ER, and I helped carry him into the stretcher. And at that time, I didn't know he had COVID. We were thinking he had a subdural, which is a bleed in his brain from the fall. But within an hour, the nurse came outside because we weren't allowed to enter the hospital, and she told us, "Do you know that your grandfather has a fever of 104, and he just tested positive for COVID?" So we freaked out in that moment because we knew at his age he had just turned 89 the week before. And we knew that at that age, based on the statistics of his age, we knew there wasn't a good chance of him surviving. But we tried everything, and the day that he was supposed to be intubated, he didn't make it. He died 3 hours before they were going to intubate him. And my father, when I got home, I remember 3 hours after, my brother called me, and he's like, "Hey, Mom just had to call rescue on Dad because he couldn't breathe. He was really short of breath." So my dad ended up going to another hospital, and that was one of the most
You
sorry.
can yeah.
That was one of the most anxious thing, is that you can't enter the hospital or be with your loved one. And so thank God for FaceTime, because the only things I got to tell my dad was through FaceTime, "Are you okay?" And because this virus causes you to be so short of breath, you are scared to talk to them because you don't want them to continue
exacerbate, yeah.
being shorter of breath. So I would just FaceTime him and, give him a thumbs up, like, "Are you okay? I love you." And he would just give me a thumbs up, like, "It's okay." And then that's what happened. Even, which is horrible, like what Chin was saying, there's no family or human contact when you're in the hospital and you feel alone. And we had to tell my dad through FaceTime that his own father passed away without being able to hug him or anything. And I mean, he lived across my dad for 15 years, so they were super close. And I know that killed him, and we asked the hospital, we begged them, like, "Is there any way we could just go for 10 minutes just to hug our dad and say, our grandfather passed away, like, we're here?" And they didn't because of the risks. So that same week, my dad FaceTimed us that he couldn't breathe anymore and that he had to get intubated. And he did, and it's frustrating because you don't know, you think that you're going to see them again. And one of my last words to my dad was, "I'll see you in 2 weeks." And he gave me a pep talk, like, "It's going to be okay. Just have faith." My dad was a very religious person. And unfortunately, he didn't come out of it. And, you'll never forget that phone call.
Yeah.
And it's hard because it's just, my dad was the strongest person, and something like a pandemic just, destroyed your life forever.
I see that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people was afraid in the hospital, like, dying alone, because that was another thing that one of orthopedic surgeons said, he see it, and he was like, really, it hits him really hard.
Yeah.
And another thing was, one of our classmates, Sai, has the same issue. I remember he called me,
His grandfather.
yeah, asking for advice, and he fought his way through, but it was, kind of late. And then when we're in the hospital, you see them, and we try our best to comfort them. And I think like that was another thing is too, is like maybe you might be janitors or CNA, regular transporter, but that kindness goes a long way. I think like people remember you because you just say one nice word, one last touch, because you don't know, and now you start seeing what's more important.
And you see, I'll never forget, there was this one nurse that I loved her. We would call her every day because you can't be there, you're limited to just calling 2 to 3 times,
Right.
and your heart's in your throat the whole day. Like, I remember for a while, anytime the phone rang, my heart would stop, even after my dad passed away, because I was still living in, oh my gosh, what's the new lab
Right.
values? And this one nurse, they actually let my mom and me and my brothers go the day my dad was coding. And this one nurse was so sweet. and she was crying because she got attached to my dad, and she's like, you know, he's so young, like he was only 57, and she's like, oh, he spent the whole time talking about you guys, you know. And she was crying, and she's like, I'm so sorry. And like I saw the toll that it put on her as a nurse, you know, like all the deaths she must see and the hurt of the family that she has to deal with on a day-to-day basis from this.
Correct. That's true. That's definitely the one thing, because you see throughout the internet and everybody YouTube, they post themselves as part of is dealing with you know, disease and taking over. And it was not like long combated diseases. It's like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month long diseases, and eventually took over your life. And I think that's something, you know, it takes a toll on a healthcare worker, as we know. So.
Yeah.
As a healthcare worker, yeah, it gives you a lot of anxiety. She just said it. Every time somebody passes away, it's painful because some people don't get to see their family member until they go say their final goodbyes. Like, every hospital is different. Every hospital has different types of rules.
Yeah. Yeah, I see the rules. Everybody has a different rule, but you know, wherever, like now these days, wherever they had a cell phone, you know, I make sure they had their cell phone next to them, even though, you know, you are risking like privacy breach, you know, type of privacy, but that little last voice carries a long way, and then they appreciate it later on. Not right away, but you know, later on, afterwards, you see it. So.
So yeah, anyone that feels that they want to share their story, we are having our first Zoom meeting December 3rd, and it's all being broadcasted on our flyer on our website as well as on our Instagram page. It's at 7:00, and it's just for 45 minutes, an hour. Feel free to share your stories. We're here to listen. We're here to talk to you and help you get through this. You're not alone. We thank you for your time, and we thank our frontline heroes and everyone involved in this for putting their life on the line.
Yeah. Giving extra miles.
Right.
That's what counts when you see it. Okay.
Thank you for listening to us tonight.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.